Hey everyone, let's talk about Dead Space, a sci-fi horror classic that gave us some of the creepiest creatures ever, Necromorphs. These aren't your typical undead. They're not just brainless zombies wandering around. Nope, these things are designed to destroy and spread their infection, turning pure nightmare fuel into a survival horror masterpiece. Necromorphs are made from human or animal corpses, twisted into horrifying, barely recognizable shapes. But don't be fooled, they're not just scary to look at. They're smart, aggressive, and a total pain to deal with. In this video, we're breaking down what makes these monsters tick, their anatomy, how they spread, the different types out there, and, most importantly, how to take them down. Buckle up, it's going to be a wild ride. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
It seemed to hold the promise of limitless energy, until it produced dementia, insanity, and a twisted life after death known as Necromorphs.
What are Necromorphs? The main antagonists of the Dead Space franchise, Necromorphs are reanimated dead tissue which is reshaped into new forms from an infection. The infection is derived from a genetic code that the markers etched into and transmitted. The creatures thus formed are extremely aggressive and will attack any living being in sight. Necromorphs exist for only one reason. They want to convert more corpses into their kind and effectively spread the infection as far and wide as possible until they enter a convergence event that will give rise to a new Brethren moon. Some unitologists and people suffering from marker dementia believe them to be heralds of humanity's ascension. The Necromorphs are controlled by a group of entities known as the Brethren moon, and this is done through the markers. Creating more Brethren moons will ultimately result in the goal of galaxy-wide extinction of life. Necromorphs can range from tiny monster-like creatures to huge hulking beasts that can infect others and create more of their kind. They're also extremely resistant to any kind of damage, which makes killing them very tricky. Dismemberment is usually the most effective way to kill them, and it's also important to destroy the parts so that new Necromorphs do not spawn from their remains. There are broadly two kinds of Necromorphs, one that creates new corpses and another that infects those corpses. Essentially, therefore, these creatures survive by bringing the extinction of other life forms. The followers of unitology worship these monstrous beings as gods, despite their killing instincts and deadly attitude. This is because they believe in an apocalyptic prophecy where Earth and all life in it are not considered important enough. The term necromorph comes from two words, necro, meaning dead, and morph, which means form. This literally makes the meaning of their name dead form. While they are often compared to zombies, necromorphs are not mindless and are not technically undead, considering how they are manipulated by the Brethren moons. Necromorphs are created from dead tissue through several different methods. The most common way is through the signal, which is emitted by the markers, either black marker or red markers. Markers are alien objects of unknown origin, and they can emit extremely concentrated energy and signals that have the power to alter any dead tissue within the vicinity on a cellular level, converting it into a necromorph. While the signal affects dead tissue the most, it is also damaging to living beings because it can result in paranoia, dementia, mania, hallucinations, and even homicidal or suicidal tendencies, which in a way just serves as a means to kill more living beings and have them transform into necromorphs. Markers are a source of infinite and unlimited energy and can tempt different life forms to create more markers in order to extend the cycle of creating more necromorphs. They can also be created by the process of injecting dead tissue into any living or dead being. The necromorphs, known as the hunter, slasher, and feeders, are created mainly in this manner. How do necromorphs spread? The creation of necromorphs begins with the concentrated energy being emitted by the markers. As mentioned, these signals can convert dead tissue on a cellular level and alter it in a way that makes it regenerate as a very deadly new form. Every necromorph cell is animated by the carrier wave of the marker because without it, the creatures will no longer exist and will simply degenerate into a pile full of slush, containing the DNA of the host organism. Similarly, the marker signals signals can severely affect the minds of intelligent and living life forms, and this is done to set the stage for an incoming necromorph infection. Interestingly, the pulse of a marker can imprint a self-replicating signal which contains blueprints in the minds of suitable individuals. This is how they create red markers, which carry on the cycle of creating necromorphs and spreading the infection. Coming to spread of the infection, it can be done directly through the necromorph pathogen, the reanimated cells created by the markers that create the necromorph. Most typically, this kind of spread is heralded by special types of necromorphs such as infectors and swarm infectors, which have the ability to directly implant the material into dead corpses. The necromorph pathogen only directly affects dead tissue and does not have any immediate effect on living tissue. However, over time, especially if the transmission happens directly into the living body, the creature will experience a slow transformation as they will gradually die with their internal organs shutting down one by one. While this is rare, it happened to Brant Harris, who became a regenerating necromorph, and Scaff soldiers who consumed necromorph flesh, leading them to becoming Wendigo-like creatures known as feeder necromorphs. After the host dies, the properties of the pathogen start taking hold for good, and the process is quick and very violent. Cellular functions go on a self-destructive overdrive, and new biologically active compounds are also created, which immediately get metabolized in the reanimated flesh of the necromorphs to help in more mutations. The bones of the host are also broken, sometimes reconfigured, or just entirely reshaped. This entire process takes very little time, sometimes even just a few seconds, and leads to the emission of a lot of heat. The violently spasming corpses become so hot that the blood in their blood vessels start boiling, which leads to rupturing of the vessels and the skin. Former organs, such as the heart and lungs, are no longer required for bodily function, so they break down and turn into additional muscles. This gives the necromorphs extreme physical strength. Slashers are the most commonly occurring type of necromorph, but the kind of necromorph that will be created depends largely on the location and circumstances during the infection. For instance, the lurkers are normally created from infant-like medical organ banks, which are used for transplants of human babies or even small dogs, whereas the guardians are created from corpses. Certain types of necromorphs are also created from many different human bodies, and this points to the possibility that some kind of intelligence is at work which allocates biomass for specific uses. Despite the variations in their shapes, genesis, and ability, all necromorphs are completely capable of surviving in very lethal environments, such as space. Of course, this points to a complete lack of the need for respiration which humans need, and for this reason, necromorphs are also immune to traditional wounds and injuries that can cause fatal blood loss in humans. This is why they are very difficult to kill, and we'll be discussing methods on how they can be defeated for good. What drives necromorph behavior? How intelligent are necromorphs? Necromorphs are extremely aggressive and intelligent creatures, and their sole aim is to attack and kill any form of life in sight so that more necromorphs can be created. These creatures also have a sort of collective intelligence that allows them to hunt their prey in a very coordinated manner, and this common consciousness results from the Nexus necromorphs, or hive minds. These are huge creatures that are able to receive control signals from markers and give orders to other small necromorphs. When these beings are created by the markers, they are not given specific instructions beyond what is transmitted by the hive minds. This makes the necromorphs behave like hungry animals who only want to gather more biomass. They will attack anyone indiscriminately, even people who are trying to further the work of the markers. That being said, there are certain living beings who are useful to the plans of the markers, so they are provided with protection against attack from necromorphs since they cannot discriminate. The marker signal creates a sort of dead space around the artifact, which is also called the Eye of the Storm, and this forces the necromorph tissue to become dormant. Through this, the marker signal draws useful individuals to its base where they will be safe from all kinds of attacks. The close proximity of these folks to the markers also means that they can be controlled and made to do the markers' will. The control signal of the necromorphs can be traced from the hive minds to the markers and finally to the Brethren moons, which are very intelligent cosmic cosmic entities created as a result of a convergence event, as mentioned. These beings can create necromorphs and also control individuals from great distances using the marker signal. The Brethren moons are also interconnected through a neural network of the stars, and they communicate how marker signals are working on different species. This leads them to create even more markers, and thus more necromorphs, and ultimately form another convergence event. While necromorphs are mostly portrayed as deranged killing machines, they can display cooperative behavior as well as planned tactical moves. They hunt in very small packs and contain mixed individuals who have specific roles within the group, and they also use a variety of intelligent methods to hunt their victims, such as stealth, ambush, or group tactics. This requires a level of strategic thinking and planning and obviously points to some kind of personal intelligence. This is seen in cases where the necromorphs sneak up on their prey using ventilation shafts, or playing dead to lure them in, not attacking until the victim is within striking range and victory is certain, and luring them. However, those who are not pursuing victims will behave in many different ways. Some wander aimlessly with no destination in mind until they come across a new victim, after which they will immediately engage. There are some that drag bodies to particular locations so it's easier for the infector to find. Again, some will just stand in place, idly waiting for victims to pass by. They are also known to intimidate the victims by growling loudly. The feeders are also shown to be doing similar things to eating when no other living beings are in the vicinity. Stalkers have the best sense of pack cohesion and individual intelligence, as they can peek and lure victims from one corner while another of their kind attacks from a different angle for optimum hunting. In addition, this is the only kind of necromorph that can actively communicate with each other. Even though they do not have a particular language, they make incoherent noises that still make sense to their fellows. Another form of necromorphs are the fodders, and they are usually seen carrying the weapons used by their hosts. This shows that they have some inkling of intelligence, or maybe their hunting behavior is on some level shaped by their surroundings. The creepers and shamblers also use conceptual adaptation as a form of intelligence, since they can use the weapons of their hosts. Even though they do this in a very clumsy and uncoordinated manner, it still shows that they have some level of motor control. As seen in Dead Space 3, when necromorphs are left idle for very long periods of time, they curl up in a hanging patch of the corruption. This is done to conserve energy for when the next prey will arrive. However, in this process, the necromorphs become sort of mummified and covered with fungus. What are the types of necromorphs? There are hordes of different necromorphs, who not only differ in how they look, but also their primal functions. While all of them share the same goal of creating more necromorphs, the way they go about this is different for every different kind. Slashers are the most common kind of necromorphs, and pose a great threat when they're in groups. They have large blades made of bones that emanate from their upper arms, which is why they are called slashers. These could either be the original arms of the infected host, or newly created appendages. These creatures have a set of small lower arms, which is helpful when it comes to crawling or holding their prey. The bones in the feet of the slasher necromorphs are extended for better balance, particularly the heel bones. However, while this helps them run or climb, walking becomes difficult. Female slashers can spit acid and are also known as spitters. Leapers are more modified and have muscular arms with small claws at the top of their heads, while their mandibles extend from their lower jaw. The most notable feature about them are their long tails, which are created from the limbs of the hosts, fused together into a single organ. These tails can coil greatly and aid leapers in jumping, allowing them to travel very long distances. Lurkers are formed from the corpses of infants of dogs, which are transformed into necromorphs. Since the hosts did not have enough muscle to begin with, these creatures are very heavily transformed. They have leathery skin and tentacles that extend from their lower stomachs, and this acts as their primary method of movement. They attack with whip-like barbed tentacles that come out of their backs, and these can fire bone-like projectiles. Infectors are special necromorphs, and as their name suggests, they can infect other forms of life or dead tissue to create more necromorphs. The host corpse gets twisted and broken horrifically and develops bat-like wings between limbs. The head of the host becomes the feeler of the infector and have a stinger-like appendage that is made from bone, flesh, and spinal tissue. This appendage is used to spread the infection. infection by enveloping the corpse into its wings and driving the appendage deep into the head of the victim to inject a fluid stored inside its body. A pregnant is another kind of necromorph that has a huge sac containing lesser necromorphs, and they have 2 large arms with bone scythe. The arms of the host corpse are fused into the sac. If damaged well enough, the pregnant can tear open its sac, and this releases the necromorph spawn inside, which are usually swarmers or lesser lurkers. Pregnants have small legs to balance themselves, but despite how huge they are, they can move very quickly. Hitting the sac is a very ineffective way of killing the pregnants, since the necromorph inside the sac can attack the player. On being decapitated, a pregnant can slash everything around it blindly, which is why it's a helpful move in case other necromorphs are around. Swarmers are reanimated chunks of flesh and are very small. They try to attack in groups to overwhelm their victims, and hence the name. They're mainly found after rupturing the sacs of pregnants. Brutes are large necromorphs that are created from multiple corpses. They resemble gorillas and even do the knuckle walk like them. They have very spiky and armored skin and have superhuman speed and strength. However, they also have weak yellow spots on their backs, which can come in handy when they're being decapitated. They can also fire bombs from the holes in their stomachs if they lose their legs, and can sometimes curl if they want to defend themselves. Guardians are immobile necromorphs that are created from human corpses and fused into huge necromorph entities known as the Corruption. The immature form is very weak and resembles a human torso with hanging guts, but as it develops, it becomes less human-like and much more aggressive. They lose arms and develop large sacs attached to the corruption mass and appendages, which help them cling to the walls. They can spew embryo-like necromorphs called pods, which attack and explode. Interestingly, the Guardian seems to retain some humanity, because it's always screaming in agony. Wheezers are a peculiar kind of necromorph that do not attack their victims directly. Instead, they are stationary at a place and can exhale poisonous gas from their lungs, which sprout out of their backs and remove clean air from the surroundings. Their legs and arms are fused together, so they can't move and thus are easy to kill. Exploders are female necromorphs who are like suicide bombers. They have huge growths on their arms, which are very explosive. They have split heads, which they use to bite enemies with, and they have oddly shaped limbs that make them walk clumsily. The explosion of the growths on their arms can be fatal to not just their victims, but also to themselves. Dividers, as the name suggests, are tall and lanky necromorphs that have the ability to divide into smaller creatures if they're damaged enough. They're extremely tall and moan a lot, which is usually an indication of their arrival. Creeper is a new name given to the head of a divider, which features an elongated tongue and 3 protruding tendrils from the mouth. Creeper heads can decapitate dead bodies and burrow their neck stumps to reanimate them as shamblers. Shamblers are dead soldiers who can use firearms, but very poorly. Twitchers result from corpses that possess stasis modules that fuse into the necromorph's flesh and give them superhuman speed and reflexes. Much more impressive than other necromorphs. While they are similar to slashers, they're far more muscular and have a gap in their skulls, which is filled with worms. Pukers can spit corrosive bile from their mouths. They have very sharp claws and are heavily mutated, with one leg being made from the intestines of the host and the other formed by both legs. They have no eyes and their jaws are fused to their necks, and their lungs are on full display, filled with acidic bile. Flesh hangs loosely from them and appears burnt, possibly because of the bile. Tripods are made from 3 corpses and are extremely vicious, even by the standards of necromorphs. They can attack using their brute strength as well as their bladed tongues. Despite this, they have large yellow weak points on their arms and tongues. Tripods have a unique female version with a female corpse as the main host and a fetus as the weak point. This variant is only found in the Church of Unitology. The pack refers to a group of necromorphs created from children, and they are rarely seen alone. They're not as mutated and still have some humanoid features, but are fairly easy to kill if they're not in overwhelming numbers. Stalkers are raptor-like necromorphs that use flanking, stealth, and other group-based tactics to catch their prey. They have huge claws and open rib cages, although they do not have organs. They have large domed skulls, which they use for both defense and attack. They're probably the most intelligent necromorphs and can exhibit very intelligent characteristics. Cysts are immobile but dangerous necromorphs that grow from the corruption that can fire explosive pods that explode upon hitting the ground. Spitters are only created from female hosts and have yellowish lungs that protrude from their rib cage. As mentioned mentioned they can spit acid from their mouths. This name was termed in Dead Space 2. Crawlers are also necromorphs that are created from infant hosts. They're very bloated, with explosive substance inside their abdomens with twisted heads. They crawl because their legs are fused together, and they usually attack in packs. Nests are created from female host corpses with at least one more corpse fused. They're usually immobile, but if anything approaches them, they can release swarms of glowing necromorphs that act as explosive projectiles. These are usually found in zero-gravity areas. Fodders, also known as wasters, resemble human beings the most, and they retain the clothes and silhouette of the hosts, but have oozing eyes and mouths that have a horrid yellow light. They can use weapons as well as trigger more mutations when they are dismembered. Feeders are created from hosts that consume the flesh of necromorphs. They have very emaciated bodies with a skeletal appearance that allows them to be very swift. They usually run in groups and emanate a sound similar to the shrill cry of a chimpanzee. Hunters are unique necromorphs created by Dr. Mercer by placing corruption tissue inside a human. It resembles a slasher but is bigger and stronger and ineffective against dismemberment. The corruption is the largest single necromorph entity, but it does not directly cause any harm to other creatures. It removes oxygen from the air and turns it into poisonous gas, which makes it difficult to stay near it. The corruption could be a key to necromorph infection and help the creatures adapt and survive in different environments. The Leviathan is a massive necromorph entity that collided with the Ishimura as it was drifting in space. It has a large gaping mouth and a bulbous orb in the center with 3 tentacles. It can spawn pods and spit out organic bombs. The Slug is another large necromorph that attached itself to the Ishimura. It is an immobile mass with several tentacles. The hive mind appears to be the collective intelligence that drives the necromorphs. It looks like a large worm creature with a set of jaws and yellow bulbs that act as weak points. It uses large tentacles and spits acid projectiles to attack. The Tormentor is a large necromorph that is formed from numerous corpses. It has a serpentile build with a large fanged maw and mandibles on its head, and long arms connected to the body through weak yellow tissue. The rest of the body is spikes and scales. It is one of the strongest of its kind. The Ubermorph has no human trait in its design and stands out among all necromorphs. It has characteristics of slashers and hunters and is extremely difficult to kill by regular means such as dismemberment. Flyers are winged necromorphs that can fly. They have a stingray-like appearance with a skinned human skull and a tail made of nerves or spinal columns. Their arms are twisted and fused to the cheeks, which act like a frame for their wings. Grabbers are otherwise stationary necromorphs that can attack by grabbing their victims using their heads, which have sharp teeth. They're only seen in Dead Space Extraction and Dead Space Aftermath. Medusas are similar to the nests, as they are also found in zero-gravity regions and can shoot homing missiles at victims. However, they can move freely, and interestingly, instead of being created from human corpses, they are believed to have been created from dead bodies of life found on the planet of Tau Volantis. Swarms are small spider-like necromorphs that appear in packs and attempt to take control of the nearest life form to turn it into a fodder of slasher. They are not to be confused with swarmers, which are found inside the sacs of pregnants. The Nexus is an insect-like necromorph that is found on Tau Volantis and is believed to be a variant of the hive mind. It can use telepathic signals to communicate with lesser necromorphs. Finally, the Brethren Moons are the overlords of the necromorph species. What role do the markers play? Markers are usually double helix-shaped obelisks of cosmic origin, and they serve to reproduce through intelligent means and generate necromorph outbreaks until the point when a convergence event is triggered, which leads to the formation of a new Brethren Moon. Markers have their own form of symbols, which they use to communicate. Markers display a unique sentient ability to control whatever they transmit through their signals, and this causes different effects depending on what is being broadcast. This sentience is a result of the Brethren Moons exhibiting some of their consciousness. As such, the consciousness of the markers is more easily discernible by individuals with higher IQ or those who have DNA more compatible with the signal. What are Brethren Moons? Also known as Brother Moons or Necromoons, these are huge, intelligent, and spacefaring necromorphs that are at the source of the marker signal. They are the direct result of a convergence event and the final stage of the necromorph life cycle as well. They serve as the central antagonists of the franchise, as their goal is the total and complete consumption of every living being in the universe. They targeted advanced civilizations and had managed to overwhelm the planet of Tau Volantis, which was trillions strong at some point. They are sentient creatures and can communicate through signals. Each moon views itself as an extension of the other, as they always refer to themselves in the plural. They believe themselves to be omnipotent and as supreme as gods. They lack empathy as well, since they show no reaction whatsoever to the destruction of their own kind. How can necromorphs be defeated? Unlike most creatures whose weak spots are their heads, necromorphs need to be attacked at their legs and other limbs in order to be killed. Dismembering their legs will knock them to the ground, and removing their hands will help stop their attacks, and in both cases, they will be easier to overwhelm. Using a plasma cutter and other secondary firing options is also useful in killing necromorphs. The kinesis model is also a very effective way to get them down. Much like kinesis, stasis is also quite useful, as it can slow them down and help in hurting them strategically at weak points. In addition to this, making use of environmental hazards is also a foolproof method of killing necromorphs, as faulty wiring that can spew electric current or heavy machinery can come in handy to kill these creatures when other methods fall short. Marvelous verdict. This was a rather exhaustive list of most of the things we know about necromorphs. They are forces to reckon with for sure, since in addition to their ferocity and aggression, they're difficult to even get rid of. It requires more than just courage and moxie to defeat one, and you need to be smart about it, using everything at your disposal to increase your chances of survival. We've explored most of the different kinds of necromorphs, along with their specific abilities as well as weaknesses. Our advice to you: stay away from the vents, obviously. Be smart and cool-headed, and avoid places that have a lot of loot. Necromorphs mean business, and you certainly don't want to get in their way. Let us know in the comments what you liked about this video. We'll be back soon, so please keep your eyes on the channel for more exciting content. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one, and be safe. Thanks, everyone.